the essence of happiness. Once upon a time, in a quaint village nestled between rolling hills and meandering rivers, lived a wise old man named Arthur. Arthur was renowned for his profound wisdom and his unyielding contentment. People from distant lands would travel to seek his counsel, for he possessed an aura of peace that was contagious. His cottage, made of cobblestones and covered with ivy, was a haven of serenity, where the chirping of birds and the rustling of leaves in the gentle breeze created a symphony of tranquility. Arthur's life was simple. He tilled the earth for his food, read old manuscripts by the dim light of his lantern, and meditated under the shade of the ancient oak tree that stood proudly in his garden. Despite having few possessions and living a life of minimalism, Arthur radiated a joy that puzzled those who met him. How could a man with so little be so utterly content, they wondered. One day, a wealthy merchant named Edward visited Arthur, burdened by the weight of his riches and the emptiness of his heart. Edward had everything money could buy: luxurious mansions, exquisite clothes, the finest wines, and a reputation that made others envious. Yet, he was miserable. Sleepless nights haunted him, and he was always anxious about losing his wealth. Edward asked Arthur, "Wise one, I have amassed great wealth, but I am plagued by an unrelenting sorrow. My heart is heavy with worry, and I find no joy in my riches. How can I attain the happiness that you seem to possess so effortlessly?" Arthur listened intently, his eyes reflecting a depth of understanding. After a long pause, he invited Edward to stay with him for a few days, promising to reveal the secret of true happiness. During his stay, Edward observed Arthur's daily life. He noticed how Arthur took pleasure in the simplest of things: the warmth of the sun on his face, the sound of the river flowing nearby, the taste of freshly baked bread. Arthur had a ritual of walking through the village each morning, greeting the children, helping the elderly, and sharing kind words with everyone he met. Edward was struck by the genuine affection the villagers had for Arthur and how he, in return, seemed to draw energy from their smiles and laughter. One evening, as they sat under the oak tree, Arthur spoke. "Happiness, dear Edward, is not found in the abundance of material wealth, but in the richness of the soul. It is nurtured by the love we give and receive, by the gratitude we feel for the simple joys of life, and by the peace we find in accepting what we cannot change." Edward was deeply moved by Arthur's words. He began to understand that his pursuit of wealth had blinded him to the beauty of life itself. He realized that his possessions had become a cage, imprisoning him in a cycle of greed and fear. Inspired by Arthur, Edward decided to make changes in his life. He sold his grand estates and used the money to build schools and hospitals in the village. He spent his days teaching children to read, caring for the sick, and working alongside the villagers in the fields. As he gave more of himself to others, Edward felt a lightness in his heart that he had never experienced before. The more he let go of his desire for material wealth, the more he found himself enveloped in a sense of peace and fulfillment. The village, once a place he had seen as beneath him, became his home, and its people, his family.